Number 4. The Great Molasses Flood.
There are countless stories of ridiculous man-made accidents damaging society throughout history, both in and outside of the United States. The priceless mistakes made by men with large egos yet small minds sometimes cost innocent citizens immeasurable amounts of trauma and grief. The Great Molasses Flood of Boston, Massachusetts occurred in 1919 on a regular summer's day. The city of Boston had an enormous steel water tank on the northern end. The tank was 50 feet tall and held 2.3 million gallons of dark, syrupy molasses. The large tank had already been split, bursting at the seams with sugar. Molasses would ooze from the gap, and children would come to collect the drip with sticks and fingers as a sweet treat. The fatal flaw that caused the sticky disaster was estimated to be the tank's construction, which was flawed with insufficient rivets and steel plates. The construction flaw, combined with a hot summer's day, caused the molasses to ferment and expand, producing gas and eventually exploding the tank. Gobs of molasses spilling into the town below. Many civilians were instantaneously suffocated in a wave of dense, hot, black syrup. The molasses flooded through the town in 25-foot waves, destroying property and sweeping up all citizens in its path. The flood resulted in 21 fatalities and about 150 injuries. The cleanup and recovery of the town was difficult as the viscous sugar quickly hardened into a tough cement-like solid, trapping bodies and possessions inside. The sweet treat rock took weeks to clean up, and the Boston harbor remained brown for months with sweet molasses. The disaster led to be one of the longest and most complex legal cases in Massachusetts history. The investigation revealed the tank's combustion was indeed at the fault of the USIA. In 1920, a court determined that the USIA was responsible for the disaster, and the company ultimately paid substantial damages to the victims and their families. It was the first class action lawsuit to take place in the United States.
Number 3. The Texas City Disaster.
The Texas City disaster was the result of a chain reaction of explosions on a ship carrying ammonium nitrate fertilizer. In 1947, a ship named SS Grand Camp was docked at the Texas City port. It carried 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. When a fire broke out on the ship, the situation wasn't recognized as severe until the ammonium nitrate detonated, causing a massive explosion that destroyed nearby ships and buildings. One of those being the Monsanto Chemical Company plant, which also carried ammonium nitrate. A ship named the SS High Flyer was also carrying the chemical, which resulted in even more catastrophic explosions. In the end, 581 people died, including emergency responders. Thousands were injured, and the infrastructure of Texas City has forever been changed because of the disaster.
Number 2. The Irish Whiskey Flood.
The stupid mistakes and small brain cells of mankind was not just limited to the United States. The Irish whiskey flood was a hilarious event that occurred in the city of Dublin in the late 19th century. Similar to the Great Molasses Flood, it left the streets flooded with copious amounts of alcohol. The Elm Park Distillery was one of the largest distilleries in Ireland and contained a tremendous amount of whiskey. In late June, one of the whiskey vats in the distillery exploded, spilling a guessed amount of 500,000 gallons of maturing whiskey. The whiskey flooded the distillery and then soon flooded the streets of Dublin in a river of malt. The citizens of the streets were quickly brought outside, where they tried to scoop up whiskey with cups, pots, buckets, and other kitchen items in order to salvage the precious alcohol. Their attempts were feeble against the monstrous flow of single malt. The whiskey eventually made its way to the nearby Grand Canal, causing concern about the potential impact on aquatic life. There were reports of dead fish floating downstream, likely due to the sudden and significant change in water composition. In parts of the city, the flammable whiskey ignited, burning 6 million euros of Irish whiskey. 13 people were killed as a result of the Irish whiskey flood, but not a single death was due to flames or smoke inhalation. Most deaths were due to alcohol poisoning or caused by consuming the contaminated whiskey from the dirty Dublin streets, for no one was able to resist priceless free whiskey. The Elm Park Distillery suffered a significant financial loss due to the lost whiskey. The incident also led to legal battles as the distillery sought compensation for damages caused by the collapse of the vat.
Number 1. Chernobyl.
In Kyiv Oblast, Ukraine, there was a power plant called Chernobyl, and on the 26th of April 1986, a disaster occurred during a late-night safety test in Reactor 4. A combination of design flaws and operating errors caused a power surge, leading to a series of explosions that caused the reactor's rupture. The explosion released a significant amount of radioactive materials, including iodine-131, cesium-137, and strontium-90, into the atmosphere. The radioactive contamination spread across Europe, making it one of the worst nuclear disasters in the world. 2 Chernobyl workers died on the night of the explosion, and 29 more died due to the radiation sickness in the following weeks. After the disaster, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established around the plant. To this day, most of the Chernobyl exclusion zone is uninhabited, although there are some areas open to tourists.